I never believed a single evening could tilt the entire axis of my life. It started so simply: dinner, laughter, the soft hum of a movie playing in the background. Just me and my stepson, under one roof, trying to share the easy calm of an ordinary night. Yet beneath that calm was something quieter, heavier. A kind of restlessness I couldn't name, like a whisper you can't quite catch but know is meant for you. I felt it in him, and I carried it in me. That night marked the beginning of a story I've tried for years to forget, a story that still breathes beneath my skin. My name is Helena. I live in a house that used to feel alive. It had the scent of morning coffee, the echo of conversations that once mattered, the warmth of two people who believed they were forever. But that summer, it felt more like a waiting room than a home, silent, sterile, and filled with clocks that wouldn't stop ticking. My husband, Richard, was always somewhere else. Conferences, business trips, hotel lounges, his world spun far from mine. He'd call when he remembered, his voice calm and polite, promising to be back soon. But we both knew soon had stretched thin over the years. Our marriage had become a schedule. We managed bills, cleaned dishes, exchanged pleasantries, and slept in the same bed without really touching each other. Loneliness had quietly taken a chair beside me at the dinner table. Then came Oliver, Richard's son from his first marriage. He was 21, tall and thoughtful, with a quiet charm that made people want to fill his silences. He came to stay with us while he sorted out his college plans and looked for part-time work. I told myself it was temporary. Just a few weeks of helping him settle before life went back to its dull rhythm. I never realized how easily temporary could turn into something else. At first, everything felt harmless. We were two people coexisting politely under one roof. We watched old movies, shared late-night snacks, sometimes went on early jogs when sleep wouldn't come. We talked about books, about music, about the world outside the walls of this house. He'd ask about my childhood, and I'd find myself smiling, remembering things I hadn't thought about in years. It was innocent. At least I wanted to believe it was. Then one night, the innocence cracked. Richard called to say he'd be away for another week. Just some unexpected meetings, he said, as if that could make up for the years of distance between us. I poured myself a glass of wine and sank into the couch, the flicker of the TV painting the room in lonely light. The rain outside was soft but relentless. Then Oliver came downstairs. His hair was damp from a shower, his gray sweatshirt clinging slightly to his shoulders. He looked comfortable, almost too comfortable. He sat across from me, not saying much at first. His eyes held something new, something watchful. And then, almost casually, he said, "You seem lonely." I laughed it off, told him I was just tired. But he didn't look away. His gaze lingered in a way that made my heart stumble. He noticed things. My perfume, the book stacked beside the sofa, the faint song humming through the speakers. His attention was no longer just kind. It was sharp, searching, full of something unspoken. When he finally said, "I don't think Richard deserves you," my world went still. I should have told him to stop right then. I should have walked away, but instead I froze, because part of me had been waiting too long for someone to see me at all. That night we talked until morning. About his childhood. About mine. About how life sometimes feels like a script someone else wrote for you, and you're just reciting the lines. He said he'd never felt like he fit anywhere, that he was tired of being the afterthought in other people's lives. I confessed how lonely marriage had become, how I missed the version of Richard who used to listen, who used to care. As the hours slipped by, our confessions softened into something else. The air between us grew heavier, quieter. When he reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. When he whispered my name, my body betrayed me with a shiver. When he kissed me, every piece of logic inside me screamed, but desire doesn't listen to logic. For the first time in years, I felt something alive beneath my skin. And that was enough to drown out the guilt, at least for that moment. Morning brought clarity like a slap. The sunlight was merciless, pouring across the room like judgment. I couldn't look at him. I told myself it was a mistake, a lapse in reason, something I could bury deep enough to forget. But the heart has a cruel way of remembering what the mind wants erased. I tried to build walls again. I avoided him, kept my words clipped, my movements measured. But Oliver didn't let go easily. He'd brush against my hand when passing me a cup. Leave small notes near my books. He'd look at me like he knew every thought I was trying to suppress. It terrified me, because that hunger in his eyes mirrored my own. One night, he whispered, "Don't you feel alive when we're together?" And I did. Not in a way that was safe or right, but in the kind of way that makes you remember you're still breathing. It wasn't love, not the quiet, enduring kind I had once believed in. It was a wild hunger, a reckless escape from years of numbness. Every touch, every secret word, pulled me further away from the life I was supposed to be living. I began to see myself in fragments. The woman who cooked dinner and smiled politely for the neighbors. The woman who waited by the phone for a husband who barely noticed her absence. And the woman who had tasted something forbidden and couldn't unlearn the sweetness of it. I hated her. I envied her. I was her, days turned into weeks. The guilt was constant, but so was the pull. The stolen glances became longer, the touches bolder. He'd sneak into the kitchen after midnight just to stand near me. We'd speak in whispers, afraid the house itself might betray us. Sometimes I'd catch myself watching the door, half expecting Richard to walk in and see everything unravel, but he never did. He was too busy living elsewhere, believing everything at home was fine, and maybe for a while I convinced myself it was fine too, that I could keep the two worlds separate. But secrets have a way of rotting through walls. They start small. An unreturned call, a shift in tone, an unfamiliar scent on the sheets, and before you know it, the truth begins to hum beneath every breath. One afternoon, I found Oliver sitting at the piano. He wasn't playing anything, just pressing random keys, lost in thought. When I asked what was wrong, he said quietly, "I hate hiding." I told him it was better that way, that what we had couldn't survive the light. But he looked up, eyes fierce and sad, and said, "Maybe I don't care if it burns." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Richard when he finally returned, his breathing steady, his arm carelessly thrown across me like muscle memory. I stared at the ceiling and realized I didn't know who I was anymore. The woman who wanted to fix things. The woman who wanted to destroy them. The woman who had already done both. A week later, Richard suggested we host a small dinner to reconnect as a family. He wanted to show everyone how stable we were, how perfect things looked from the outside. I agreed, smiling like a ghost wearing my own face. Oliver was quiet that night, polite but distant. Our eyes met once across the table, and in that brief glance I saw it all, the longing, the regret, the inevitability. When everyone left, he packed his bags. He didn't say goodbye, just paused at the door and whispered, "You'll never forget this, will you?" He was right. I never did. Months passed. The house became quieter than ever. Richard noticed my detachment, tried to bridge the distance with flowers, with vacations, with apologies that came too late. But something in me had already shifted. Once you've stepped over a line that can't be uncrossed, the ground never feels stable again. Sometimes I still think about Oliver. Where he went, who he became, whether he ever forgave me or himself. I tell myself it was just a moment of weakness, that the storm has passed. But every now and then, I'll catch a reflection of myself in the window. And I'll see that night all over again. The laughter, the silence, the first touch. The moment everything changed. And deep down, I know that while the world moved on, a part of me stayed there, forever caught between guilt and desire, punishment and memory. Because that's the cruelest truth about forbidden things. Once they awaken you, they never really let you sleep again. I used to think love was about loyalty, about staying even when it hurt. Now I think it's about honesty, though I learned that lesson too late. I built a life on quiet lies, and it took just one night to expose every crack beneath it. Maybe someday, the truth will spill out. Maybe Richard will look at me and finally see what's been hiding in plain sight. Or maybe he already does and chooses to stay silent the way I once did. Either way, the story doesn't really end. It lingers like a song you can't stop humming even when you forget the words. If you're listening to this, maybe you'll judge me. Maybe you'll understand. Maybe you've stood at the same edge, looking down at the wreckage of a choice that felt too good to resist. All I know is that once you've tasted something forbidden, it doesn't just fade. It brands you. That's the thing about secrets. You can bury them, ignore them, pretend they never happened. But they don't die. They live quietly in the spaces between your heartbeats, reminding you who you were when no one was watching. And for me, that reminder comes every time I pass by the old piano, every time rain taps against the windows, every time the house feels too quiet. Because in that silence, I still hear his voice, soft and certain, whispering that I wasn't invisible.